Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're cracking open an incredibly profound ancient Buddhist text called the Cakkavatti Sutta. Now, on the surface, this thing reads a lot like a grand cosmological myth. But as we unpack it today, you're going to see a surprisingly modern, deeply analytical warning about the cyclical nature of human civilization. We're going to literally break down the exact mechanics of how a utopian society falls apart, how it hits absolute rock bottom, and ultimately how it manages to rebuild itself.
Okay, let's dive into this. So what is the exact root cause of a society's ultimate collapse? If you were to guess what causes a totally enlightened, globally prosperous civilization to just completely unravel into a violent dystopia, you'd probably guess, I don't know, a sudden war, a natural disaster, or maybe some massive spiritual failing, right? But the text actually gives us a highly specific structural answer to this. Though before we look at the collapse itself, we really need to understand the ultimate defense against it.
The original explainer of this ancient framework is the Buddha himself, speaking directly to his monks. And he kicks things off with this incredibly powerful instruction. He basically tells them that true stability absolutely cannot rely on external society because, well, as we're about to see, society is incredibly fragile. True stability has to start with individual mindfulness, closely observing the body, the feelings, the mind, and the core principles of nature, the Dhamma. You've got to build this completely unshakable foundation within yourself first, before stepping out into the wider world. So keep this idea of making yourself an island in the back of your mind, because it's the anchor for everything that follows. To really illustrate just how fragile the world is, the Buddha tells a story about the ultimate utopian era. We're talking an era ruled by a Cakkavatti, which translates to the ideal wheel-turning monarch. Now, this king doesn't rule the earth through force or weapons or harsh punishments. He rules purely through righteousness. He actually possesses a mystical divine wheel, which acts as this literal and metaphorical compass guiding his just rule. But there's a catch. This wheel isn't just some inherited magical object. It only sticks around if the monarch actively fulfills their sacred duties to protect all beings and, this is absolutely crucial, to prevent poverty.
Part 1. The Dominoes of Collapse, the Economic Fracture.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how things start to go wrong. We go through 7 generations of absolutely perfect monarchs, but the 8th king, he makes a fatal error. He rules fairly enough according to his own ideas, but he totally neglects to consult the ancient wisdom. And his biggest mistake? He fails to provide for the destitute. So the fall of this incredible civilization doesn't actually start with some big spiritual rebellion. It starts with a critical economic mistake. Let's walk through this devastating causal chain, step by step. When the 8th king fails to give wealth to the poor, widespread poverty naturally takes root. Because people are literally starving, a citizen finally steals something, just to survive. The king tries to patch the problem without fixing the root cause, so he just hands the thief some money. But when everyone else sees this, they start stealing too, hoping for a quick handout. Realizing his massive blunder, the king swings completely to the other extreme. He orders the thieves to be beheaded. And boom, that is the breaking point. The citizens realize that if they want to steal safely, they have to strike first. They forge sharp weapons and they start murdering. So simply failing to provide for the economically disadvantaged directly sparks this escalating, violent sociological thriller. To truly grasp the scale of what happens next, we have to wrap our minds around a pretty mind-boggling number. 80,000 years. Yeah, you heard that right. At the peak of this utopian society, human health and vitality were so perfectly aligned with moral living that the average human lifespan was legitimately 80,000 years. We are operating on a massive cosmological timeline here. But as the violence we just talked about takes root, the human condition begins to drastically deteriorate, both morally and physically. You see, physical degradation tracks perfectly with moral degradation. When people start lying just to avoid execution, the lifespan instantly drops in half to 40,000 years. As malicious speech and slander start to spread, it plummets again to 20,000, and it just continues to freefall. 10,000 years for illicit lust, 1,000 for false views, all the way down to a mere 250 years as sheer greed and total disrespect for family and elders become the norm. The society isn't just losing its moral compass, it's literally bleeding out its life force.
Part 2. The 10-year dystopia. The absolute nadir.
The consequences of that initial economic fracture spiral completely out of control into a genuinely horrifying reality. We hit the absolute bottom of the pendulum's arc. The maximum human lifespan is now just 10 years. Society utterly fails to protect its most vulnerable, leading to the horrific exploitation of girls being married at age 5. It is complete, utter moral bankruptcy. And the environment? It degrades right alongside human ethics. Fine foods like honey and ghee just vanish, and people start treating coarse grass like a delicacy. The psychological degradation is absolute. The very concept, the very word, morality, completely disappears from the human vocabulary. Utterly ruthless people are celebrated, society descends into animalistic incest, and this vicious, blinding hatred infects even the closest family members. This total societal collapse culminates in a terrifying apocalyptic event known as the sword interval. Basically, for 7 full days, humans lose all recognition of each other as human beings. They look at their neighbors, their friends, even their own families, and all they see are wild animals. Sharp weapons magically appear in their hands, and they literally hunt one another down in this absolute frenzy of mutual slaughter. It is the ultimate inevitable endpoint of a society that has entirely forgotten compassion. And this brilliantly illustrates the extreme bookends of human existence as presented in the sutta. On one side, we have an 80,000-year peak defined by abundance, righteous rule, moral purity, and deep compassion. And on the flip side, a terrifying 10-year nadir characterized by famine, total moral amnesia, and mutual destruction. The contrast is absolutely staggering. It shows us, in no uncertain terms, that our physical reality is a direct reflection of our collective ethical choices. Part 3. The pendulum swings, the rebirth of virtue. But here is the amazing thing. The cycle doesn't actually end in extinction. A tiny fraction of humanity manages to escape the madness of the sword interval by fleeing deep into the wilderness. They hide out in forests and ravines, just barely surviving on roots and fruits. Once those 7 days of slaughter finally end, these survivors slowly emerge from hiding. Seeing each other alive, they rush to embrace. And in that moment of intense relief and absolute clarity, they have a profound realization. They realize it was their own immoral actions that brought them to the very brink of extinction. So they make a simple but incredibly powerful choice. They vow to stop killing. That's it, just abstaining from murder. But that single virtuous act serves as a massive catalyst. Over generations, they progressively adopt other virtues. They stop stealing, they stop lying, and they slowly begin to respect their elders again. Let's move forward and see how this builds, because just as the decline was exponential, the recovery is too. As they wholeheartedly embrace virtue, their lifespan begins to double. 10 years becomes 20, 20 becomes 40, all the way until we see the human lifespan skyrocket back up. The society heals, the environment recovers its abundance, and humanity eventually returns to that majestic 80,000-year lifespan. During this incredible new peak, a glorious new capital named Cakkavatti is established, and it's ruled by a righteous new wheel-turning monarch named Sanka. But more importantly, the society's deep spiritual readiness culminates in the arrival of Maitreya, the next fully enlightened Buddha. He appears in a world of total prosperity and peace to teach the pure Dhamma, bringing this entire cosmological cycle full circle. Part 4. The ultimate reward, becoming your own island. Okay, we've just traveled through millions of years of societal collapse and rebirth. But do you remember the Buddha's opening instruction? The monks listening to this don't actually need to wait 80,000 years for a utopian society to experience its benefits. They can cultivate those exact same rewards internally, right here, right now. So the crucial point is, the physical, long life of the utopia is achieved internally through mental concentration and effort. Beauty is achieved through flawless moral discipline. Happiness comes from deep meditative states. And true strength is the ultimate liberation from all mental defilements through pure wisdom. And look at how the Buddha redefines wealth. Remember, that was the very thing the eighth king failed to provide, which triggered the whole terrifying collapse to begin with. Well, for a monk, true wealth isn't gold or grain. It's a mind perfectly balanced with the 4 divine abodes. We're talking 25% boundless loving kindness, 25% deep compassion for suffering, 25% empathetic joy for the success of others, and 25% unshakable equanimity. This is the ultimate inner wealth. This is what prevents the internal collapse of a human being. The Cakkavatti Sutta leaves us with a really profound realization. Society isn't just some external machine happening to us. It is a mirror. It simply reflects the internal state of the people who make it up. When we hoard wealth and ignore the vulnerable, the mirror shatters. But when we cultivate inner refuge and boundless compassion, the mirror reflects a utopia. So looking at the systems we are actively building and the way we treat each other today, which direction is our pendulum swinging right now? Are we walking towards the island of refuge or the interval of the sword? I'll let you sit with that. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you in the next explainer.